Welcome, everyone. Gorgeous summer night. Thank you for being here, and thank you for coming inside for our Artist Voice series. It's a series of lectures, talks, conversations with artists, and it's part of our mission to share both the pleasures and the provocations of contemporary art, and to connect artists with audiences. Actually, Jim Hodges, our guest of honor, and I were just sitting in the green room and talking about this aspect of the ICA's mission to find myriad ways to unpack contemporary art and kind of make it live in different ways, so that when you get to go upstairs in the galleries, and I hope you've all been there and we'll spend a lot of time in the galleries over the summer, you have a little more to bring with you in your experience. Tomorrow night in our galleries, the musician Shellie Hirsch, who's a collaborator with Jim, will be performing in the galleries at both 6 o'clock and 8 p.m. So if you're around or you know people who would be interested, please come and pass the word. Give More Than You Take is the title of this 25-year survey of the work and of Jim Hodges. And with me here is Jim, certainly, and the ICA's assistant curator, Anna Stothart, who coordinated the installation of the exhibition here at the ICA. The show was co-organized by the Walker Art Center and the Dallas Museum of Art. And we are stop 3 on a 4-city tour. It goes to Los Angeles after it leaves the ICA, and we're the only venue on the East Coast, and we fought really hard, actually, for that position. Part of the reason we fought so hard to have this show is the importance of Jim's work and Jim as an artist, but part of it is because of the very particular pleasure it is for me to have Jim back in Boston. This is the 3rd time that Jim and I have worked together in Boston, so it's really special. The second time, I'll start with the second time, was in 2000, at the old ICA, when it was also a survey exhibition, but it was a survey many years ago, so it was smaller and we were younger. We were even younger in 1998 when we did our first project together. And I don't know if we have a slide. Well, maybe it'll come up. But if you're upstairs listening to me, no, not that. I think they're going to cycle, but if I see it, I'll point it out to you. But the first project we worked together was part of the ICA's Vita Brevis initiative. Vita Brevis Ars Longa, life is brief, but art endures. And it was a project that I founded to produce works of art that responded to the landscape and the history of Boston. And these works could go from the poetic to the polemic. And the very first project was to invite 4 extraordinary artists to take a chance with me and on me to do new works of art on the Freedom Trail. And Jim was one of those artists. So it was really the very beginning of my work with the ICA in a different iteration. And one of the most, I love that work. So I wanted to talk about that. So let me just ask, does anyone know who works at the ICA whether we have that image in this slideshow? If you know this, could you yell it out? No, we do not? We have a yes and a no. Okay. All right, perfect. So then let me tell you a little bit about it. It was in the courtyard of the Old North Church. And it was many, many, many small wind chimes that were hung in the trees that canopy the Old North Church courtyard. And they were wind chimes you'd collected from lots of different people who you'd either found them or they sent them to you. You, I think, asked people to send you wind chimes. And so you didn't even see most of the work. You heard it tinkling. And there was a plaque in the courtyard that read, "Here we are, at this place between places, a great historic monument, ourselves." So I thought I'd start there. because a lot of your work, not all of it, but a lot of your work deals with some of the themes that were contained there. Place, chance, sound, history, politics, and the self. So I thought we could maybe structure the beginning of this conversation around those themes. Also, those are so many themes, like anything we say will probably fit under that umbrella. So that piece is full of wind chimes. And upstairs, our Founders Gallery is full of bells. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe you could start by talking about sound in your art and like what the bells and the wind chimes, like how you think about them.
Okay.
So hi, Jim.
Hi.
Welcome. You're back.
Thank you.
This poor man has not been home since he came to Boston to install the exhibition, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So I am glad you're back, but I'm sure you're ready to go home. So talk to us for this program, and then we're gonna let you relax. It's okay.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you for that introduction and for inviting me again to work with you and the ICA. And that particular work of the wind chimes installed on the Old North Church was actually was the kind of a first for me as well in terms of making a work that was utilizing a kind of framing mechanism or associative mechanism with a text to hopefully engage or to make an opening for something to occur in a random passerby, and in the use of the trees and that historic site and it's that kind of, as I said, an in-between place, that it wasn't necessarily the destination. The destination was further on, I believe, being the church, but it was along the path, and have been interested and continue to be interested in the location of experience and inventing or interjecting a kind of theatrical moment that can adhere to a person or to the moment as a way of making contact and as making contact, I think.
It was also a kind of a wake-up call, right? It was like, here we are. You know, it's biblical, Hanani, right? I mean, what did you want us as the viewers or the people reading that plaque, or yourself? What did you want us to wake up to?
I don't know if I had a specific goal in mind with it. I thought that and I don't.
Of course, it's a long time ago. We can probably hardly.
No, but I do know that I wouldn't have started out with any particular end, that I was aiming for, because I don't necessarily do that in my practice. Yeah. I was interested in making an experience, as I am still, and leaving the reading of it and the meaning of it to the experiencer as the completion or the chemical addition or additive part that will hopefully make something turn. That something being, for me, is the location or the place of art, mm-hmm. Being within each of us, and that the events, if they can be orchestrated right, will create art, create the experience of art. The objects that I make, or the way that I arrange them in space, the usefulness of space and time, are about creating a kind of performance. The work for me is performing, and it performs in a collaborative fashion with another.
So Olga Vizo, who's the director of the Walker Art Center and one of the co-curators of the exhibition, she used the word choreography to talk about the exhibition upstairs. So a term from a different discipline in that way. Is that part of what you're talking about in terms of how you shaped this exhibition?
Well, I think the use of objects, the bringing together of objects in space, through architecture, provides a kind of theatricality. And for a while, when I was quite young and trying to figure out how to make a drawing or define for myself what a drawing is, part of what I arrived at was that a drawing is about an exchange and about an opportunity. And part of what a drawing does is that it creates placement of not just itself within architecture, but with a person. And so that's when I started thinking about the choreographing of experience through the utilizing of sculptural or drawn gestures in space. And I guess that the Vita Brevis project was one aspect or one way of trying to articulate that, or to utilize this kind of thinking strategy to rise to an occasion of an invitation, like you had offered me. There, of course, within the materials were quite simple and quite reductive, and I work in quite simple, I guess a kind of refined, if you will, narrow material spectrum, though quite broad in its diversity, but the individual pieces are usually quite reduced to a kind of a singularity. And so the singularity of the Vita Brevis experience was the sound of the bells themselves, and this small text. All of that being loosely placed within an environment that could or could not be seen or recognized. And at that particular time, that kind of chance or casualness played a very important part of the kind of work that I was doing at the time. I guess that there's a range a developing range, or kind of an expanding range in my practice that work fits within a particular kind of edge of, which has more to do with, I think, with a kind of invisibility or kind of accidental kind of characteristics.
You were just in a very unusual space architecturally, right? In Provincetown.
Yeah.
Right? You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. I was a friend of mine, Josh Prager, in 2009, purchased Hawthorne's barn in Provincetown. It was I think the barn was built in the early 1900s, and it was where Hawthorne had his first art school there. Provincetown became known as the first art colony in the United States. And this historic barn was for sale. And Josh, who is a writer, and who had grown up in New Jersey and whose family had summered since he was a child in Truro. So he had grown up basically in Provincetown, and when he heard that the barn was for sale, he decided he wanted to buy it for himself to use as a writing studio, but also as a way of preserving historic site, and so then he set out to create a non-for-profit called 20 Summers, and where he would 1 month out of the year invite artists, local Provincetown Art Associated people from all over the world actually to come and spend time in the barn. And this was his first year of 20 Summers, and Josh asked me if I would like to spend 5 days there. So the timing was so perfect that the show here opened, and the next day I got on the boat and went to Provincetown and spent 5 days there in the barn. And the barn is an extraordinary place, and it's Josh's incredible person, amazing, kind of a force of nature, who managed to hold off the developers for a second and maintain the building. He unfortunately had to sell the building because he didn't have any money, but he does have a non-for-profit, and the men who bought the building from him agreed to let him use the space 1 month out of the year for the next 7 years. So I'm hopeful that the barn will continue after that. But if you ever get to Provincetown, which I recommend you guys go to, I'm sure you have all been, the ferry's right there. The barn is, of course, it's privately owned now, but during the months of May 15th, June 15th, for the next 6 years, there'll be a programming going on there, and I encourage you all to go there because the site itself, I've never been in such a kind of glowing space of light. All day, the light was glowing, and I would just sit there, and I mean, I was making drawings or whatever, but I would just sit there and think that I've never been in a space like that ever. It's quite extraordinary, and Hawthorne knew what he was doing when he sited the building, and for sure when he put the windows in. Anyway, that was amazing.
I told you I was going to ask you this next question, but thinking about artistic, both friendships and influences, much has been said, written, kind of everywhere you look. It's like your work is linked often with Felix Gonzalez Torres's beautiful work. But who are your other friends besides Felix? I mean, who are the artists, past and present, that you look to? I would love to know.
Well, thank you. It's an interesting question, kind of funny. Felix, of course, was extremely influential, and
to many of us.
Yes. But personally, to me, if Felix liked something, you knew it, and if he didn't like something, you also would know it. But he was very enthusiastic about things he loved, and he befriended me, and we were brought together because of our work, and we had an incredible friendship. But other people who, I think Shellie Hirsch, of course, who's going to be performing here last night, also a remarkable artist and someone who I happened upon out of sheer luck in the early 1980s out at PS1, where she was performing one Sunday afternoon. And when I saw Shellie, I knew that I was experiencing something that was completely unique and profound, and I remember turning to my friend, or at least in myself, I was thinking, she's doing what I want to be doing. She's making the kind of work that's happening live right now, the kind of work that is speaking to me on so many different levels, and in such an incredible, generous splendor of energy. And I thought that's someone I fell in love instantly. So I started stalking her, as all audience members do as a fan. I started going through the Village Voice whenever I see her name. There was no internet or anything there, so I had to do it. Look at the Village Voice, and whenever I'd see her, I would go to the performances, and I would always bring as many people as I could because I wanted to share it. And so anyway, that's one of in the old, when the Knitting Factory was on Houston Street, I had gone there to see Shellie one night, and we happened to run into each other on the way to the bathroom, and we started talking, and it turned out that she had her studio, her house where she lived in Tribeca was a block away from my studio. And it was the beginning of an incredible friendship, and then, as you said, we've collaborated and worked together in the past. But it's a lucky thing about proximity and living in a place like New York. I've been very lucky to meet incredible, amazing, extraordinary people, and my friends, who are all artists in some way, are my kind of, they've become my family and my inspiration, and I guess that's just how you kind of choose your tribe. I guess historically, of course, there are many artists that I look to as a kind of, part of my family tree, if you will, and those go back to, the cave paintings and certainly the prehistoric work at Newgrange in Ireland to Michelangelo and Picasso and Bruce Nauman, Richard Tuttle, Yoko Ono, John Lennon. Music and performance has been and still is very, very important to me.
Any of the artists of the Pacific Northwest? I know you grew up in
Mark
Spokane.
Tobey and
that's what I was thinking.
Certainly the Northwest visionaries were influential. Probably more when I was young, living in the Northwest and in Spokane where I grew up. Informs oneself of kind of a regional heritage, if you will, but also looking at some work that is. You just feel kind of a kinship to. But it's an ongoing kind of. I guess it's also an ongoing kind of developing kind of list of people and things as well. But talking backwards in history, that was kind of the list. I remember when I was younger, I felt it was very important for me to have to know my heritage or my lineage, and it was important for me to decide for myself where on this branch of art history was I connected to, and I felt it was an important thing for me to identify myself with a particular kind of tradition or history. And those people who were the most, I guess, the branch that at least I was creating from my own imagination historically, were linked to Richard Tuttle and to Eva Hesse. And it was the kind of experimentation and the ways that the gesture from these artists manifest and became physical that I was really inspired by.
I love that.
And also, I think the kind of groundbreaking or the seeming endless courage and inquisitive kind of natures that I was drawn to. And I think that I'm still drawn to those inquisitive, courageous
That's a perfect segue. I'm going to go one more direction, then I'm going to turn it over to you, Anna, and to talk about this specific exhibition a bit. But you and I have spent over the years a lot of time talking about politics, and you're talking about courage. And you have a very particular perspective about the role of art as a force and a counterforce in the world. I'd love for you to share a little bit of that. That's, I think, really central to who you are.
Well,
you can do it.
Thank you. I guess what I want to say though is the work. My work speaks much better than I do, and I can try to articulate this way to maybe bring some insight into how I think or what I value. But the work is speaking the clearest and the most precisely. And so that being said, I think that being in a post-Boysian location that we find ourselves in today, where through his brilliance he divined that art is social, and that in the social there is art, and that everyone is an artist, that we now are living within that moment, and that we artists come to institutions like this one and the many other around the world where we can locate ourselves in the seat of our artness, of who we are as artists, because we can find ourselves and know ourselves in places like this. Not exclusively, but it is a place that we can find ourselves very much at home. I think that as a younger person, my difficulty and my challenge was, and my disappointment was in my abilities, was that I lacked a particular skill to take my work to a place that I considered to be necessary, kind of political, in a very literal way. And so I found that I lacked the talent to make my work have meaning in a more didactic or specific political kind of gesture. But I realized in that inquiry that my identity itself and who I am as a person, honestly expressed, was the most political I could be. And that if I would focus on my imagination and my curiosity and be true to my inspiration, then I would find myself making work that would have importance and would matter, and that my politics and my need for expressing my concern in the world would be answered through my pursuit of that. So today, I find that a situation like this, for instance, allows me the opportunity, thanks to my work, to give voice to concerns that my work couldn't possibly carry because of the weight of them. But I am concerned, like all of us are, of conditions of that we find the world to be in. And
All right.
I think I need to, address them when I can. And the opportunity to have an exhibition like this is like, okay, well, what's the show's purpose? I know that it has its usefulness. I at least hope it has that. But how else can it be utilized to provide opportunity to express a political concern or an issue, kind of illuminate an issue? So for this exhibition, I made a T-shirt that lists. The first T-shirt was made and was released the day of the opening in Dallas. And on the T-shirt, on the front and the back of the T-shirt, in alphabetical order, are lists of countries who have on their books laws that punish people, LGBTQ people. So on the shirt, you'll have the first country, along with the punishment. And the punishments range from 3 years in prison, 100 lashes, death by stoning, 7 years in prison, and the list goes on and on and on. When I started out, it was 72 countries. By the time the show, 3 months later, the show opened again in Minneapolis, that number had gone up to 78. And today it's still at 78. And so my thinking, my fantasy, was wouldn't it be great making this t-shirt and watch it all just disappear? And I still very much believe that that's what's going to happen. I know it will. I would love to be able to witness it and to be able to wear the shirt and watch that disappearance. But we've only made 3 t-shirts, so we have a little ways to go.
We just need more
That was-
exhibitions.
I know that was a hard question.
Yeah, so thinking about the exhibition, and first I just want to say, it has been such a pleasure working with you, Jim Hodges. I
thank you,
have
Anna.
had so much fun, and it was such a privilege to install the show with Jim. And I kind of wanted to talk about how the fact that, given the opportunity of having a show at the ICA, you really took on the architecture of the building, which we sort of began talking about, and the fact that you utilize the elevator and our founders gallery and really thinking about the visitor experience. And you and I had a conversation about the ability of art to sort of reach. It's this human connection between the visitors and you without it being direct, but through the work. And I think that's kind of what you were just touching on with the work speaking. You feel as though it speaks more clearly about these issues than you do verbally, which I don't necessarily agree with. But I do definitely see your point. I think you articulate things very well. But I wanted to talk about the title of the show, because I think that it says what the exhibition does, give more than you take. And so I was wondering if you want to talk a little bit about the title, where it came from, its meaning, and how it's sort of carried on through the different iterations of the show.
Thanks, Anna. The title, Give More Than You Take, is a work of mine that I made 6 or 7 years ago. And I wanted to include the work in the exhibition. And the work has existed as t-shirts and as lift tickets in Aspen at the Aspen Ski Resort. That was actually its first iteration, was on the lift tickets of people going skiing. And also as banners. I made 3 banners that hung on the outside of the Aspen Art Museum. And the whole challenge of titling is always a challenge. Sometimes it's not, actually. Sometimes the words are there, before you are. But this particular problem of coming up with a title or words that I thought were useful or appropriate for this exhibition was quite a lengthy one. And anyway, so wanting to include the work in the show, I realized that if I titled the show the work, then the work would be included, and it would be the right thing to use that opportunity by marrying the two together.
And you think of it as it's almost a proposal to people, a sort of. I
think it was a proposal to me. I think it was a matter of just talking to myself, which basically just a reminder.
Yeah.
But the initial the work was initially used as again as this lift ticket, and as these banners, and the lift ticket was in a similar way to like the Vita Brevis opportunity. It was like, well, how do I use this space and time? How do I use this form, a lift ticket, to have some meaning, and how do I make it have some importance,
Mm-hmm.
and not just be, something that looks like art to someone, which they wanted from me. They weren't necessarily thrilled when I provided they being the ski company.
Text-based work.
But they went for it, which was fantastic, and then they wanted to own it, which was impossible. So they were disappointed in that too. But to me, it's like I wanted it, as I said, I wanted to make contact, and thinking about, I don't know if any of you have been skiing out there or not, but you go up into those mountains, it's extraordinarily beautiful and profoundly humbling to be in that kind of magnificence of nature. It's truly inspiring. And we're all in their fancy clothes and whipping down the mountains and everything, but it's like, these mountains are quite beautiful, and the land wasn't always ours, and at one time was in the care of custodian people who tended to it, and then were kind of manipulated out of it. So now it belongs to other people. And it was that those people, specifically thinking of the native people and what they got from the exchange, was far less than what they actually gave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that not that I don't think that it was taken from them with any kind of sense that they were necessarily wanting to lose their homes and their homes.
Yeah.
But it was something that occurred. So that's I guess the beginning points of thinking about words like those.
Yeah, and it actually segues into my next question about, I've been thinking a lot, and I think I've even mentioned this to you in the past, of some of your more recent works, particularly the large denim mural, which I think is in the background there and was just there a few moments ago. And I've been thinking of it in relation to early 19th century artists like Caspar David Friedrich, which I think we spoke about, and this idea that he was an artist who made these paintings of the sublime nature, basically these massive landscapes and skyscapes, these little teeny people to show the awe in which nature is. And so you and I talked about that a little bit, and so I think a lot of your work makes me think of that. And even thinking of the Vita Brevis and the use of nature, there's always this sort of thread of nature through your work. And so I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about the importance of nature and how it inspires. And I don't know, you even use the word optimistic, I think, and how you find optimism in it.
Caspar David Friedrich is also on my list.
Part of your tree.
Add it.
No
Done.
pun intended. Right.
But
Yeah. Sorry.
Maybe talk about the camouflage. That's like a really specific.
Well,
That's a
I
great-
guess
yeah.
I can talk about all
Yeah.
of it at once. Nature, or the landscape specifically, man-made nature, maybe more than even nature, but nature and landscape were, I guess it's like, I'm from Spokane, and as a kid, that's, you run in the woods and you play in the woods, and that's where you grow up. And I found myself as a young person at home in the woods. It was a place that I would go to work. I drew there. I would go out into the landscape and I'm, you know, a dendrophile in a certain way, like my friend Justin would say. My earliest inspirations and my earliest kind of subject, because I think that's what we're talking about, was nature, and it has remained that. It's funny. I moved to New York to go to graduate school in 1983, and have stayed there since, with one or two kind of trying to escape trips into different parts of the country, but the city always pulled me back. The thing that my vocabulary, my voice, I needed to be in New York to find, and the nature that is, I guess that I work from is my own, and I don't think I would have been able to. I don't think I would have been able to access or to consider nature in the same way if I hadn't lived and kind of come of age, if you use that language, I guess that people would say that, in New York. But it was really, it was not, you know, that I'm not I mean, I work with materials. I work with kind of the inspiration from image, but not exclusively image-oriented. And often, though, when I'm working with image is derived from nature. I think image also, nature, getting to the camouflage, that image, the pattern itself being a stand-in, a representation, an artist's invention of nature, was very interesting to me. That Abbott Thayer would make these discoveries through his investigation into animal concealment, and then invented camouflage. And I felt that it was the most beautiful kind of rendering of it, and I still feel very strongly about the pattern. I like how it, I wore it for a long time as a kid, and I like how it becomes landscape on the body. Anyway, I'm getting off track, but
No.
I want to make sure we have some time to open it up for questions.
You can't ask me questions because I just talk.
I know.
And
But
then I don't stop.
Let's see. We'll open it up a little. Can we get some light so I can see?
I see Cheryl.
Cheryl. And I'll repeat it.
I love your work.
Thank you.
So how does that come together for you?
Let me repeat it. The question is that Jim works in so many different materials. How does he move between them and make the decisions about what material is right to express his idea?
Thank you.
God, there's not a single answer for it. I guess if there was, there maybe would just be one thing. What's going on upstairs is 25 years of work, a selection from that period of time. So obviously there is going to be a range of question and a range of gesture there. But the initial, I guess the starting out point for me, and it was my dilemma with my ideas. The dilemma being that I had a lot of them, and that I, in my very naive and younger thinking, found it as a problematic to have a lot of ideas, because it was hard to establish a kind of recognizable whatever you want. Everything I thought of it when I was younger was like, oh, well, artists have to have a look or some kind of crap like that. But as I said, I was naive and still am fairly. But the thing is that I am inspired by numerous things, and these moments of inspiration, or the kind of the entry of an idea is not under my control. The articulation and its filter through my body is where my job is engaged. But the idea itself is something that I am aware of, and if it comes to me, as it does with artists, we all have ideas. The usefulness and the articulation or the refinement of an idea, once delivered, then is basically where the mechanism of my thinking takes place. So there's the subject, if you will, or the material suggestion, or as you were saying, a chain or something. It's the unearthing or the manipulation of that specific thing that can be turned to present another meaning, a meaning of variation, and it's that kind of sculpting of material that I'm interested in, and where I find my use, I guess, as an artist. But that, I write down a lot. I write a lot of ideas down. I used to write down so much more with the computer. I'm getting in a really bad habit of not writing as much, but just my own personal problem. But the
It's all of our problems.
there is, I record ideas, and then I set out to make things, and because I lack skill and knowledge of most things, I have been luckily introduced and brought into the company of people who are incredibly gifted and talented and able to articulate much better than I have. So I've relied for a very long time on the kindness of others, but also on their ability and their willingness to go somewhere with me. I am a collaborative practitioner as in my work. It's something that I didn't realize that I was so much when I first started out, but then later when I started thinking about the choreographing of experience, and I realized that this is actually a collaborative thing that I'm dealing with, and that has, of course, developed over a long period of time. I'm sorry. See, you asked
We'll
one
take
question.
another one. That's okay. Let me help you.
Sorry.
All right.
Hey.
I wanted to ask about this.
All right. A short answer about the first gate. You can do it.
I don't know. I don't think I could. Thanks, Evan. The gate was my first one-person show, I guess. First use of space as material, where the meaning would be the I guess utilizing space itself as a subject, color as well. so that's basically, I guess, a very beginning of something. And it was quite different for me as far as something I had attempted, but I had never had the opportunity to use a room in public before. I mean, I was making lots of installations in my studio, but as a young artist, I hadn't been given a gallery before. And so that was my first gallery experience. And for that first gallery experience, I thought, oh, I'm just going to use the gallery itself as the starting point, and as the work itself. So that, of course, has been an ongoing, I guess, developing curiosity and interest in terms of, I guess, location and where is the object, what is the object doing in space, what is the, where are the vantage points. I'm very interested in these subtle material possibilities.
Good job. One more,
not
I
easy.
think. I know. Is there one more question? Please, go ahead. The question is about the piece He and I.
Yeah, thank you. He and I is I had to separate the making of it from the thing, because they're two different. They're really quite different. The work as it becomes a record and a symbolic representation of an event, but also of a portraiture. So the associations that are in the drawing are there. Its meaning is there, and I think that it's doing its job well. And so I can't really comment other than each time I make it, I can give you, I guess, a little context of the drawing historically for me. It's about temporality and a site specificity, portraiture. That's where the work was kind of born from. I also, on a personal note, I like making the drawing a lot. I've shared the making of it at every museum that I've made it, and that's been a nice collaboration with some people too. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are.
That's it.
Do you want to go on? We got a lot. I've got a lot more questions,
You
but
wind me up and I don't
I
stop.
know. Well, I think there are so many kind of polarities that your work toggles between and opens up a big space in between celebration and mourning, in bells, open and shut, kind of this sense of craft and concept that you bring together, beauty and degradation in so many ways. And I have found in just the few weeks since it opened that there's works there that I've seen over the years and works that are new, and I find that approaching it is really, it's giving me a great structure to, as you said, to be surrounded by this art that is all about inquiry. And in many ways, inquiry that gives you some clues or questions for how to live a life of goodness.
Oh, thank you. I'm interested in the questions for sure, and I'm glad that. Thank you for, as I said earlier, for inviting me to have the show here, and the performance that's going on upstairs. The show, I think, is doing it. I think it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and the problems of taking a show on the road like this, if anyone's interested in the problems of a show like this, is that the materials are the same each time, and the spaces are different. And so the reintroduction of work in space and the restaging, if you will, of a performance is challenged by the kind of limitations of architecture. And we started out talking about that, and it was a real challenge, and at the same time it was also quite a pleasure to make the work do its thing in this way. I like flexibility, and I guess that's part of what I try to maintain in my thinking and my practice, is to be flexible. So,
Well, thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being here and for